two guys that I really like here, two guys that are fun, two guys that bring personality to the cage, to the octagon. And I think that that's important, right? A lot of people want to just be meat and potatoes, want it to just be about the punches and the kicks. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we're all here for, right? We watch all these fights each and every week, no matter what. But people that make it memorable, that give you something to talk about, that's people like Chase Hooper. That's people like Jordan Leavitt, who are characters. Chase Hooper is a funny guy. I think he leans into that part of his personality. He doesn't look like a guy who is a cage fighter, and he doesn't take himself too seriously. He can laugh about that fact, but he goes out there and he fights hard. I've seen him get knocked out brutally. I didn't see it coming when he was fighting Steve Garcia, but I have to say, in hindsight, it kind of makes sense. Steve Garcia, tested veteran, a guy who's been around for a long time. And, maybe he was outmatched on the ground, but the fight played out on the feet. He got blasted early. He got blasted often, and he got dropped, right? And that happens, it's the fight game. But he goes out there as an underdog against Nick Fiore, and he gets the decision, gets the win there. And I was happy to see that for him. I'm a fan of Chase Hooper. I think he's a cool guy. I like to root for him. And unfortunately, we have to say the late Felipe Colares, unfortunately lost his life due to an accident. So that's horrible. Absolutely not the kind of thing that you want to see. And so we just can only pray for his family and wish the best to his teammates as well. But Felipe Colares, before that fight, we had taken some positions on Chase Hooper on the money line. Chase Hooper by KO. I believe it was plus 170 on the money line. I believe the KO was plus 1,400. If I'm wrong, it was plus 1,200. A great prop, a great memory from a betting standpoint. So wanted to just shout out those guys for putting on a great fight and a great war. But what Chase Hooper has put on tape, which is something I always talk about, is the fact that he's very effective and relentless with his ground and pound at times. The problem for Chase is the fact that he can't always get the fight to the mat. A lot of the times it's catching a kick, it's landing a strike, it's getting into a clever back take that gets him the fight to the ground. But when it's not that, sometimes it just turns into too much standing on the feet, getting into striking exchanges that don't favor him. However, the UFC has match made him pretty accordingly in this fight with another primary grappler out of Syndicate MMA. Jordan Leavitt is a good fighter. 4-2 in the UFC, got the knockout win over Victor Martinez and really shocked people in that fight. I think he surprised people. And Paddy Pimblett had beaten him just one fight prior, got the finish in that spot. He got a split decision win over Trey Ogden a fight before that by throwing primarily leg kicks, just got after him with a bunch of shots from distance. So we've seen Jordan Leavitt win striking matchups, I should say, in the UFC. And get the win like that, but it hasn't always been pretty. The pretty knockout against Victor Martinez was a little bit more anomalous. The Trey Ogden fight looked a little bit more like what we expected from him in the striking. Very conservative, but somewhat effective, and he was able to get the split decision win there, convinced two of the three judges that matter that he had done enough. Submitting Matt Sales in the UFC in the year of our Lord 2023 doesn't really tell me a lot. To tell you the truth, but I do think that, hey, he went out there, he had a winnable fight, he did the job, and he delivered. But you look at the Claudio Puelles fight, and Claudio Puelles is a guy who's basically been knee bar or bust in the UFC for most of his wins. And he got absolutely audited by Dan Hooker in his last fight. I thought that he was going to be able to potentially knee bar Dan Hooker because he's so long and awkward, but he just ended up putting himself in horrible positions and giving up really bad spots. And so you see that he was able to get a couple decision wins in the UFC, but not over guys that matter. Marcos Mariano, a guy who was 6-5, who I don't believe had a very long career with the company, 7-7 overall as a professional. So I think that Jordan Leavitt is a guy that has kind of, been skating by a little bit. The win over Matt Wyman, the slam, it was awesome. It was cool. But Matt Wyman really was at a position where he probably should no longer have been fighting in the organization, with all due respect. And it just seemed very apparent from the beginning. He got the win on the Contender Series via arm triangle choke. Do I expect him to submit a guy like Chase Hooper here? No, I do not. So for me, this is going to come down to who's made bigger improvements in the striking, who's going to be more effective in those positions. But the ultimate reason that I'm leaning towards Chase Hooper here is I think he has superior cardio. I just look at these two guys on paper and I try and figure out, okay, what could distinguish these two guys? And you've got a guy in Jordan Leavitt who's 6-1 career to the submission. He's 3-1 career to the decision. He's never been knocked out. And on the other hand, Chase Hooper, he's 4-1 career to the knockout. He has been knocked out, but he's 5-0 career to the sub, never been submitted. And he's also 3-2 career to the decision. So when he's gone to decision, hasn't always gone his way, but he lost to Steven Peterson, guy who was way more experienced than him at the time, had like 15 more professional fights, and Alex Caceres, another guy who's like a BJJ Brown or black belt, who competes in grappling himself and who's a UFC lifer who's been around for a very long time. So it's a weird fight. It's a crazy fight, but ABCs, they always bet on cardio. And I do think that the cardio points to Chase Hooper in this fight. Paddy Pimblett, I don't think looked like a much better fighter, than Jordan Leavitt. But what happened? Jordan Leavitt kind of just collapsed under pressure in that fight. Paddy kept getting in his face, making it a scramble, making it a war, just trying to keep on him. And eventually he just didn't like the pace anymore. I think he slowed down and I think he gave up. So I think that he's a tough guy and a good fighter, but I don't really have a ton of faith in him this week. So I want to shout out to everybody who participated in the poll, guys. I just dropped my notepad, so I got to pick that up. But I want to shout out to everybody who participated in the poll. If you guys haven't yet, please go ahead and do so. It's still live in the chat as far as I'm aware. And you guys should be able to put in who you think the parlay buster is going to be on this main card. Before the show, I can report back that we had the majority of votes on Chase Hooper. So y'all think Chase Hooper is the parlay buster? Hey, minus 245 may be so, because his performance as a favorite has not been admirable. 3-2 as a favorite for minus 2.2% ROI. So that is something that I'm definitely going to take into account. But here's the other thing, guys. Jordan Leavitt, 1-1 as a UFC underdog, minus 42.5% ROI. Extremely small sample, right? But hasn't looked so good over that sample either. So this is an interesting fight, good scrap, but overall, I'm just going to lean with the cardio and the size advantage here for Chase Hooper. I think that when it comes down to two guys that are both talented on the mat, he's beaten a bunch of black belts, and he's done it mostly by outlasting them, beating them up on the ground. This is interesting. Pick'em says Leavitt is a man and Hooper is a kid. Simple as that. Fair enough. I think that that's interesting. Why should Hooper win? I believe he has superior cardio, and I believe that he has good ground and pound. So I think if he's able to extend this fight, to make it a dog fight, and to get on top of Jordan Leavitt in extended exchanges, I think he's going to land ground and pound that turns out to be meaningful, and I think he's going to get to good positions. So that's how I feel about it. But again, if the tape tells me otherwise, I'll come back to you guys on Thursday and say, hey, I gotta own the loss on this one. But I just think that when I'm looking at this matchup, when I'm looking at these two guys on paper, I've liked what I've seen from Chase Hooper from a development standpoint. He's almost 25 years of age. I tried to fade Josh Fan because he had flipped in odds. And because he was 22 years of age, but he was able to recover from bad shots and keep coming forward. I'm not comparing the two in terms of skill, but I just mean to say Chase Hooper is at a point where he's got a lot of professional experience, relevant professional experience. So I'm not saying that I'm backing him at minus 245 here, but I'm going to wait and see what the KO prop is on Chase Hooper because I have bet it in the past and it's been really wide. And I'm going to look to see what the ends by KO is as well in this fight. Because again, you got two guys that are very credentialed on the mat on paper. And while Jordan Leavitt has been submitted before, I think that, if Paddy Pimblett had preferred to go for a TKO there, I think he could have TKO'd him as well because of fatigue. So that's just the way I feel about it. And I'm going to look to see if I could potentially capitalize on a big number there. And we'll see how it goes. But again, please participate in that poll. If you guys have thoughts, let me know what you think and who you think is going to be the parlay buster. And go ahead and fire it off in the chat as well. Let's see what else. I want to make sure that we give some credence to the chat here. And shout out to Harry, who just left a very kind comment. Says, hello, Liam. Great show so far. Thank you very much, Harry. I appreciate the kind feedback, my man. And we'll try and keep it going in a very fun and productive way. So Pick'em says, yeah, Hooper's making improvements, but he looks like a high schooler. Hey, looks can be deceiving, my friend. I swear Chase has the most reactionary lines in MMA. That's also very true. And here's the other thing, guys. I just want to point out one last trend before I move off this Chase Hooper fight. I'm a Chase Hooper guy. I bet on Chase Hooper in the past. I like Chase Hooper. I've only bet on him as an underdog 3 times. I bet on him. I am very plus money on Chase Hooper fights, but I do recognize that he's a lot easier to get behind as an underdog than as a favorite. Hooper by KO at plus 350 is disgusting, but if I can get ends by KO at plus 300, that's probably the way I'll look to play it. And honestly, Leavitt by KO is like over 10-1. And how do you beat Chase Hooper? I mean, you put hands on him, right? He's a very tough guy. He is very willing to take damage. We've seen that a bunch, but he also takes a bunch of damage, right? He just gets hit cleanly a lot of times. So I think that that's important to take note of.